Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. So this past week we've been settling back into our retreat time, the Vasa period, the period of the traditional rainy season retreat time. And after certain very pleasant busyness with having Lopasamato here, and at the same time a kind of hard-working busyness of refurbishing the spring, and so that all of those things have come and gone, and we've been able to settle a bit more into a bit simpler routine. And as we settle into, and it has to be conscious. I mean, we can complicate anything if we try hard enough. But we have to make it conscious that we are trying to settle, to simplify, and then even when there are certain busy things that need to be attended to, again, it needs to be made very conscious so that we don't complicate or don't agitate ourselves. But it is very helpful to have the external circumstances such that it supports simplification. In our own internal practice, I think it's helpful to try to keep the meditation itself fairly simple. And you don't need to try to get too fancy. Just try to keep attention with the in-breath, the out-breath. Keep the attention on in sitting meditation. Keep the attention on the one step after another in walking meditation, and realizing that it's it is pretty basic what we need to be doing, and then even when we're using, say, a meditation object, like the breath or the sensation of touch for walking meditation, that is still simplifying that in the sense that it's not about the external object or the externalizing of the object, but an internalizing of the quality of attention and awareness. And and of course that's something that we can we use the sitting meditation, walking meditation as a basis for establishing that attention, but then recognizing that we can be carrying that internalizing of that quality of knowing, of awareness through all the postures that we engage in. It's just as a natural awareness that becomes more and more a refuge in second nature. But of course, before it becomes second nature and really becomes a refuge, it does take a certain amount of persistence and patience to keep coming back to the formal practices. It's the same with with any skill, really. If you're learning a new skill, say, just like woodworking or something, it takes time to. How do you use the tools? How do you become aware of the nature of the different kinds of wood? How do you do the basic things like making particular types of joins and how to do those fittings of the joins really neatly. And if you don't really learn those basics and pay attention to them, then you can end up spending a lot of time doing things that are not so refined or not so functional or not so long lasting. So it's learning the fundamentals and the basics, and getting that down well. And same with meditation, really giving yourself the time and giving the attention to those fundamentals, and keep coming back to those fundamentals. Keep questioning. Do I really understand that? How do I use this? How do I refine this? How do I get a more clear sense of how to help the mind become more settled and clear? And this is just you're still using the these fundamental tools of breath meditation or walking meditation, but there's an ongoing willingness to reflect and investigate of how to really benefit from it and how to refine it. And it's not like an obsessive refining, because say in the Buddha's teaching, it's not about, say, ultimate refinement. It's about how do we free the mind from suffering. It has a very specific goal or a very specific agenda. So that just learning how to settle the mind enough to start to pay attention to is there some kind of suffering, dis-ease, discontent, dissatisfaction, and then how to recognize where does it come from? What's its root cause? What is the origin? And of course, this is just following these Four Noble Truths that the Buddha taught, and but not just being content with, say, knowing the Four Noble Truths, whether it's in English or Pali, but picking up those Four Noble Truths and reflecting, investigating, drawing them inwards. That's what say this Dhamma, when we do the chanting and reflect on the Dhamma, one of the qualities is that it's open-aiko. It's leading inwards. We have to draw it in to our experience, draw it into the heart, and consider. And particularly, there's many aspects that one can be attuning oneself to, but say the aspect of attuning one's attention to say the cause of suffering, starting to investigate that. So often the assumption that we work by, or by what we tend to, the conclusion we jump to is often that the cause of suffering is something outside. If only I got what I wanted, then I'd be happy. I would never suffer again. If the world would only fit into my preferences and my idea of how it should be. Of course, you articulate that, and you realize, that's stupid. That's never going to happen. But without investigating and without paying attention, you start reckoning, it's a habit of mind. It's a habit of our being that we tend to, in reality, we tend to do that. And that's why it's important to pick up I mean, picking up these Four Noble Truths, sometimes you pick up one of the truths and explore it in a more detailed way. And so just this evening, just to encourage people to investigate, well, what is the origin? What is the cause? Because when we see that more clearly, then we're much more able to relinquish the cause. Because that's what the Buddha says in terms of the appropriate response to each of the truths. There's a duty or an appropriate response, and without seeing it clearly, then we tend to respond to it unskillfully. So that, and the Buddha's encouragement or delineation of what is the appropriate response to the cause of suffering, which he points to as tanha, desire, is to abandon it, to abandon desire, and that abandoning can't really be accomplished just through some kind of ideological stand that we make. We say, "Oh, I got to abandon all desire because the Buddha told us to," and that doesn't work. It needs to be seen, needs to be understood, needs to be recognized, then to really start paying attention to how does this desire work? What's it feel like? How does it manifest in the mind? How does it manifest in the body? What does it tend to do? And so that's starting to really acquaint oneself clearly with this tendency to respond to the world around us from desire, and that and first of all, it is important to recognize that when the Buddha says that, say, suffering's root cause is desire, that it's tanha, and tanha is a technical term that is the desire that is rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion in some way. It's rooted in defilement. It has, say, a kilesa as its source, say, as opposed to desire that can be motivated by a good intention or and that has a different word. Chanda is a different term that can be used, that points to desire that's either, say, like motivation, interest, wholesome desire for truth, desire for goodness, desire for well-being. Those are, it's a different type of desire, and has a very different result. The result of tanha is always going to be suffering. This is the very nature of tanha, of that form of desire, is that it's always going to result in suffering. That starting to recognize that there are different types of desire, and seeing how they work. Because we don't have any motivation for practice without some form of desire, but how do we channel it or encourage it, a form of desire that's not going to create problems for us. So that reflecting on that nature of the desires that we do have, and what is it? Yeah, what's it feel like? What's the flavor of it? Is it worth it? And then, of course, when the Buddha points to desire, he points to different forms of desire. And in the first discourse that the Buddha gave, outlining the Four Noble Truths, pointing to, saying, kama, tanha, so sensual desire for stimulation, gratification, for sensual pleasure, and and that's it's a pretty ordinary form of desire, pretty basic, but when the mind becomes focused on that, or when it functions from that, then it easily it gets focused on trying to gain some kind of pleasurable sensation. And when it does that, then it oftentimes blocks out the results that may happen, either toward oneself or toward others. So it can easily end up being very kind of selfish or heedless or reckless or insensitive, and it creates problems. Being able to recognize that when we are motivated by or sense gratification, we oftentimes miss a larger picture. That not being able to see the effects of our actions and the effects of those desires, because it's so focused on just gaining some kind of pleasant sensation. And of course, this is one of the things that why are we why are we motivated, or why are we inclined? And it's pretty much hardwired. For then the Buddha says that generally people are seeking pleasant sensation because they see no other form of relief from suffering than pleasant sensation. That being drawn into because if all we ever experienced was unmitigated suffering, it gets pretty miserable, and we'll take just about anything as a relief for it. And of course, that's exactly why the cycles just keep turning over and over again. We end up dissatisfied and frustrated by our existence. Because in the end, it's the whatever pleasant sensation we experience It isn't harmless, it isn't innocent, unless it's seen and understood. Because it isn't as if say the Buddha or the Buddhist practitioners don't experience pleasant sensation, and it's actually, and the Buddha is pretty bold sometimes in saying, who experiences more pleasure, me or King Bimbisara, who can gratify whatever pleasure he wants. So he said, wow. And one of the person he's asked that, I said, wow, obviously King Bimbisara, he can get whatever he wants. He said, well, you think King Bimbisara can experience unmitigated and uninterrupted pleasure for a day, or a night, or a day and a night, or up to 7 days and 7 nights? And he said, I don't think so. He said, I can. Because it's a, so that when you're not complicating the mind, not complicating the heart with these kind of desire patterns that aren't understood, then what's left is the opportunity to experience well-being. So this is why it needs. See, these Four Noble Truths need to be seen so clearly. Is this contemplation of suffering, cause of suffering? It's not to make you more miserable. It's to give you the tools to free the heart from its tendency to create problems, to create dukkha, and to then experience a real relief from suffering, real cessation of suffering. So that understanding these desire patterns, sensual desire, kama tanha, bhava tanha, desire for being, trying to prop up a sense of self, a sense of me. And see, its opposite is vibhava tanha, a negation of self, this non-becoming, non-being, trying not to be, trying to eradicate or push away this sense of self. And it manifests in, that's where views and opinions start to manifest, or a sense of competition is manifested, a sense of comparing oneself to others manifests, and then the whole sort of realm of self-deprecation. I mean, that's where on vibhava tanha side, self-deprecation, trying to, or that tendency to undermine one's well-being, through a sense of a negative self-perception. Those are all manifestations of this bhava tanha, vibhava tanha cycle, and to being able to understand the impulse within the mind, within the heart. And of course, one can't think one's way through this. Obviously, you have to use some kind of directing of attention, directing of intellect, but I see, it's like you ain't gonna think your way out of this problem. The mind has to learn how to be settled, to be clear, and to see things clearly, see things in their true nature, and see things in. And this, of course, we've just had Luang Por Sumedho here, and to be able to see, it's like this, because we tend to, how we tend to relate is how we want things to be, how we don't want things to be, how we think things should be, how we think things shouldn't be, and these are all additions that complicate, but to be able to see this, to stop and not proliferate, and to say, it's like this, just to be able to be with our experience, whether it's experience of the external world or experience of ourselves, or what is our state of mind, what is it, what is there. So to be picking up the practice, so that we're coming back to this settling of the mind, and that's why I began the talk with just this encouragement to keep the practice simple in terms of paying attention to the breath, paying attention to the body, paying attention to the posture. Keep it simple, and then start recognizing, what do I add to any particular moment? And is it resulting in some kind of freedom from suffering, or is it just adding another layer to that tendency to experience suffering in some way? And suffering is just like, any kind of you don't have to be sort of overwhelmed by despair and misery. It's more like just any kind of uncertainty, kind of a certain restless quality, kind of dullness. Those are all unsatisfactory. They're all a sort of form of suffering. From very small, seemingly small, ordinary things to kind of big and seemingly overwhelming. They're just different sort of flavors of dukkha, and to be able to just say, "Oh, this is dukkha," and then recognizing, well, what kind of desire am I adding to that? And to be able to recognize that impulse of the mind to move, or to add, or to to complicate, and it's just that movement that is and that's where that you start recognizing, tuning into, oh, that's the actual desire. The desire is not the particular label that we have on it. It's that movement of mind, the impulse within the mind. Saying about the Buddha, one of the words that the Buddha, mano sancetana, the mental volition, and the Buddha points to that as a nutriment. We're feeding on it, and we're feeding on it, but it's also feeding on us. We're trying to consume this movement of mind so that we get what we want, but of course it's coming back and consuming us. So this manosanjaya, mental volition, and it's this nutriment. And the Buddha points to it as what he calls a nutriment. And it's nourishing and being a nutriment for suffering. It's what feeds that whole process. And pointing to that, so learning how to understand it, because that's that impulse toward the volition, the mental volition, the movement toward creating thought patterns. And it's not that thought patterns are bad and you try to annihilate them. That is vibhava tanha. We relate to it with, but it's creating knowledge and understanding that allows it to cease, or it doesn't get. We're not using it as a part of the process of feeding suffering. That's as the Buddha says, when we understand that process of mental volition, the mind movement, that's when we'll understand the three types of desire. And when we understand those three types of desire, liberation is right there. And the image that the Buddha gives for that nutriment of manosanjaya, mental volition, is like being put on somebody taking a person and putting them on carrying them and putting them on a pit of burning embers. It's sort of like, that person go this way now. Oh yes, of course. And because it's a movement toward. It's like being pulled along by our arms and legs and dragged towards a pit of burning embers. It's, as long as it's not, as long as we keep moving keep the mind moving, keep it, sort of seeking something else, something other, something more, and we'll keep suffering. So that being able to put it all down. And this is it's not putting it down in the sense of pushing away or annihilating. It's just a lot of it's around not picking it up. It's like the image that Ajahn Chah uses pointing to this big rock that's around the big rocks that were around the Uposatha hall in Wat Pah Pong, saying, "Oh, is that rock heavy?" You look at, "Oh, it's really big," and you think, "That's really heavy." I said, "Well, as long as you don't pick it up, it's not heavy." And it's that simple, but it's the habit is to pick it up and carry it. So just learning how to not be picking up moods and movement of mind, and that's where that tuning into the nature of desire. What's that movement? What's the effect? What's it feel like within the mind? And that's where this relaxing into awareness, relaxing into this quality of knowing is so important. And it's not trying to fix the mind onto an object. It's not trying to make it into something so that you have the perfect state of mind. It's just relaxing into this ability of the mind to be aware and alert and present. And we can do that. when we don't complicate, because it's there already. There's a lot of it is trusting in that. So it's like trusting in awareness, trusting in that ability of the mind to know. And that's where you think in terms of, say, having refuge. Say, having Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha as refuge. It's that it's not sort of that you grab onto Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, this is my refuge, and I'm going to hang on to it desperately. So it's learning how to have that quality of trust and confidence. That's what a refuge is. That's what, say, faith is, sattha. That's where faith and confidence and wisdom and discernment start to be balanced with each other. So that learning how to trust in awareness. I'll offer that for reflection this evening.